make some sense of it all, but I can see it makes no sense at all. Is it cool to go to sleep on the floor? 'Cause I don't think that I can take anymore. Clowns to the left of me, jokers to the right. Here I am, stuck in the middle with you.
Good morning, everyone. Lots going on as usual. Today is Friday, January 9th, 2026, and the USA is going to buy Greenland. It's going to happen. They're going to buy Greenland. I'm pretty sure of it. Rubio's meeting with Greenland representatives this week or maybe next week, but it's Friday. So Trump's a let's do it now kind of guy. He's like, hey, Don Jr. and Marco Rubio, get on a plane and head to Greenland, buy it for me. Here's some money. Just like Scrooge at the end of A Christmas Carol, right? Very interesting. Yesterday, I was reporting $1 million per resident. I hear now it's $100,000 per resident, which puts the purchase price at $15 billion if you include the $10 billion invested in Greenland as, Trump splashing money around from the U.S. and the cost of the $100,000 U.S. dollars for all the residents. So that's an interesting offer, and that sounds more realistic than $1 million. So we'll see how that whole thing plays out. It's going to be interesting for sure. Starmer wants to ban X because Starmer doesn't like free speech and is afraid of his citizens because he's rolling out the globalist plan, and the citizens have noticed and they don't like that, and they're using X to communicate, and Starmer doesn't like that. So how do you deal with that? There's no consideration for stopping doing the bad policies and bad behavior that are causing your citizens to hate you. No. Let's silence our citizens. That's the better way. That's how the modern left deals with things. Silence my critics, please. Let them eat cake. Tim Walz is making hand gestures. So he's Masonic hand gestures, it looks like. And that's interesting. I'll show you that in an entertaining kind of way. And liberals are making fun of Doug Ford. Erskine Smith is making fun of Doug Ford, asking for pipelines urgently because of Venezuela and the impact that Venezuela and the money flowing into Venezuela will have on people wanting to do a deal in Canada. And I mean, realistically, if you went to a company now and said, do you guys want to build a pipeline in Canada? I think they'd laugh you out of the room, honestly. Right? Like, are you serious right now? Please. Okay. Come in again and ask more creatively, and maybe we'll get a different answer. No, it's not going to happen, right? It's ridiculous. You're going to wait and see what the parameters are for Venezuelan oil, and then you're going to take your billions of dollars and invest in Trump. I think that's going to be what people do. And so anyway, we're already kind of screwed, but we'll see. We'll see how things play out, I suppose. And still no deal on the USMCA. And Carney is working hard in China. What? Yes. Carney's gone to China with his buddy Ma, who just crossed the floor from the Conservatives and is from Hong Kong, right? So the whole thing's madness and crazy, and there's lots to get to. Let's get to it. First, we have to start with China. And Blacklock's reporter is responding to themselves, and they start out with China represents new partnerships, according to Mark Carney, ahead of the Beijing trip. And he avoids a mention of earlier comments during the election, which was very, very, not that long ago, very, very shortly ago, that the People's Republic of China was the number one security threat to Canada. I'll choose my words carefully, said Carney. And the response is, Prime Minister's trip comes 1 year after a commission on foreign interference report said Chinese operatives may have helped elect a handful of MPs in the last two elections. Bill C-70 Act, countering foreign interference, passed into law June 19th, 2024, but no deadline was set for enforcement. So nothing's happened since then. And we got screwed again, right? Set up that football again, Lucy. We are going to try and kick it. Here is Blacklock's reporter again, and they say the brother of Justin Trudeau is summoned to testify Wednesday over disclosures that the Trudeau Foundation falsified Canada Revenue Agency filings to conceal China donors, a breach of federal law. So, and they definitely did do that. They had to refund something, and they didn't know how to refund that something because the person didn't exist or they were only on paper and so on and so forth. So they kept the money, and then it was a scandal, and then it was papered over and everybody just said, oh, move on. And there were many scandals since then, bigger scandals, much worse scandals. So people forgot about that one. Michael Korvig is weighing into all this as well. He says Canada's former Prime Minister Jean Chrétien was in Beijing Monday to meet Chinese VP Han Zhang. Looks like a warm-up act for Prime Minister Carney's just announced visit next week. I told Politico Chrétien, a frequent flyer to China and in and out of politics. He's on a private list, not officially on behalf of the Prime Minister, but one can imagine he'll try to set the tone for discussions and determine the scope of what may be possible at the official meeting next week. Given his close ties to Power Corporation and Canada-China Business Council, I said Chrétien served on the board of Power Corporation, which has historic links to the Liberal Party, and his daughter is married to Andre Desmarais, a deputy chair of the financial services company. And one other quick thing, Chrétien's brother has something to do with China as well. I believe he does anyway. Looks like an effort by certain business interests to deepen trade and investment. Canadians should watch closely what sort of deal-making follows. Carney's goal, elevate engagement on trade, energy, agriculture, and international security in talks with Xi, Premier Li Qiang, and business leaders from both countries. Sure, but my concern is that the Canadian government could make concessions on national security and policy autonomy and mute its diplomacy about problematic PRC behavior in return for economic benefits. I told Politico that would be a strategic error because it would contribute to emboldening the CCP to be even more aggressive in expanding its influence. Bill Defense, this person, VP of Research and Strategy for Asia Pacific Foundation, told Playbook that while it makes sense to deepen economic relations where it serves Canada's interests, it doesn't, though, because Trump's on a warpath. So you want to get in the way of that. It doesn't serve our interests, but okay, right? They're trying to make that argument, but I don't think it does. The government needs to take steps to protect national security. Investment screening, that's going to help. Yeah, sure. Investment screening, like Mark Carney screened from his investments? Sure. Research guidelines around sensitive technologies, AI, space defense, dual-use technologies. Possible wins, deepening energy cooperation, both conventional and renewable, has potential to bolster the Canadian economy. Yeah, well, do you think that China is going to replace the United States for buying oil? I don't know, man. Maybe natural gas. China is the world's largest net importer of crude oil, but gets only 1% of its oil from Canada. China is the top Asian destination for Canadian oil since the Trans Mountain Pipeline expansion became fully operational in May 24, and there's room to grow. Bottom line, Carney can't lose sight of the strategic context. China is determined to dominate its region and reshape the international system to better suit the CCP's authoritarian might makes right worldview. It weaponizes any economic dependence like trade, canola, and seafood. Pursuing economic opportunities in Beijing must be balanced with closer coordination with allies and like-minded partners, for example, through G7 efforts to build a China-free supply chain when it comes to critical minerals. So all of that's very interesting. I think it's a mistake to tighten our ties without actually addressing any of the issues that have been brought forward about China, and especially with Trump behaving the way he's behaving, and China being cut off from Venezuelan oil is impactful. And I'm concerned, or not concerned, but I think it's plausible that powerful people who say, how could we possibly replace this oil from Venezuela, think to themselves, Canada. Right? And so are we just trading places with Venezuela, from Canada being the protected little brother of the United States to Venezuela being the protected little brother of the United States? And we're out here in the cold, up here in the cold, right? So not that cold today, but will be cold again tomorrow, I'm sure. So those are the kind of things that I think about with regards to China. I think that it's a mistake that we're making, and I think the mistake is supposed to enrage Trump, but I don't think that these people are creative, nor do they understand what's happening. I don't think they're looking at this through the right lens, and so their misunderstanding makes them think. It's like they look at a chessboard and they don't see the move. They don't see the move that's going to undo them, and they're arrogantly thinking they're moving to checkmate, but they get themselves checkmated because they're arrogant and they're not looking at the board properly. That's what I think is happening with our leadership. And so they're moving towards China, thinking they're making strategic partnerships, thinking they're doing things to diversify our trade and things like that. But in reality, we are moving towards our own checkmate and allowing our king to be unguarded while we do it. And so it's like my son moved a horse into position to put me into a fork with my king and a rook. And I saw it there. I knew it was dangerous, and I promptly forgot about it, and I let him do it. And I didn't mean to let him do it. I just let him do it. And I was like, oh man, I even saw that. And I didn't do anything about it. So that's what we're doing right now. Wealth Moose says Brookfield won't say how much exposure it has to China, how much entanglement, how many trade deals, how much trade they're doing with China. But here's what we do know. Billions bet on Shanghai land. $276 million Bank of China deal during a crash. Ties to a real estate tycoon with CCP links. Now Carney's visiting China after he called it a security threat. And no one's questioning this? No one asked questions? Oh, yes. Mr. Carney's super smart to go to China now with Trump behaving so rationally and such. And don't get me wrong. I do believe Trump's behaving rationally, but I don't think our leadership is behaving rationally. We need to lock down trade with our biggest trading partner. And if we don't do that, that's going to cause big financial problems for people. And so having Carney court China while this is pending seems irresponsible to me. Alex Pearson is responding to Stephen. Stephen says Liberal MP Michael Ma, who defected from the Conservatives in December, will be among those accompanying Mark Carney to Beijing next week, the Prime Minister's office said. Alex says nothing to see here. Right? So weird, right? Dean is responding to Blacklock's reporter, China represents new partnerships. We read that tweet earlier. Dean says, after Chinese operatives may have interfered with 2 Canadian elections, the government passed Bill C-70 to counter foreign interference, then set no deadline to enforce it. Now we're told China has a new partnership, and even Mark Carney is suddenly choosing his words carefully after calling the PRC Canada's #1 security threat. Election interference, no accountability. New law, no enforcement. Beijing trip, smiles and silence. Defending democracy means action, not amnesia. Canada first means protecting our elections first. They say one thing and they do another thing, and we're supposed to believe the thing they said is the thing they did, but often the thing they did is opposite to what they said. Here is this guy, and he's talking about Chinese, what's going on, in his opinion, with what the U.S. thinks about this whole China trip. Here we go. Well, I'll just back it up just a little bit here.
Canadian diplomat in Beijing and senior fellow at Synopsis. Charles, thanks for being here.
Good to speak with you.
So we get into this too. This relationship is complicated, especially over the last several years, but Canada clearly continues, and Mark Carney in particular needs to look elsewhere with what's happening with the U.S. What do you think, and what are the expectations should be for this trip to China?
Well, my expectations are not very great. I think in terms of the U.S. is probably not happy that Canada declared last year that our relationship with China is a strategic partnership. I mean, you know, who are China's other strategic partners? Russia, Iran, North Korea, Venezuela, are they also our strategic partners? It's, you know, it doesn't sound good in Washington. In terms of the accomplishments of the mission, you know, you mentioned trade. China's economy is not doing well. So the idea that China would take imports to substitute for their own production, probably not happening. Energy, you know, we hope to sell more liquefied natural gas and oil to China. We just have to get it to Tidewater. Agriculture, China would reduce the tariffs on our canola seeds if we allow China to sell electric vehicles in Canada. But that, you know, for Canada would be devastating to our auto industry because the Chinese EVs are so heavily subsidized and also present a very serious security risk because they're essentially spy machines on wheels. So
yeah, you thought your phone was bad. One of the things that I find interesting, and it just occurred to me listening to this guy, is that we're not actually getting pipelines built to Tidewater for the benefit of Canadians. We're doing it for the benefit of China. We're doing it to maybe replace Venezuela, but I think not even necessarily replace Venezuela. They were probably trying to diversify their places where they get oil from so as not to run into the situation they're in right now. So I don't think that it's for Canada that this pipeline is going to get jammed through. It seems like it's for China. It's pretty wild. So I think that's interesting. We are in a situation where the pipelines and all of this stuff with regards to China and Canada's production and Canada's trade Mark Carney and the leadership are betting big on not the United States. And that's a mistake, because look at what the United States is doing. Holy smoke. Betting on the other team while the United States is batting 9,000. Okay, guys, this is a stupid idea. This is Sam Cooper, and he's talking about how Trump knows kind of the score of what's going on here. It's 2 minutes long. It's probably worth listening to the whole thing. He sets up a lot in the preamble here that takes about a minute, and then the meat of it is really in the last 30 seconds, but all the 2 minutes is worthwhile. So we'll watch all of it.
Daniela, I'm hearing from current and former high-level police officers that say, despite what the Globe and Mail or Daniel Dale at CNN are reporting about, 40 kilograms is it. No, Canadians have no idea the level of criminal money laundering running through our cities that's connected to this. So that's the issue. I just want to add, before we look, where do we go from here? What Mark is saying about a hurricane, that hurricane is going to hit us with 25% or more if we don't put a real fentanyl czar in place. That is someone with credibility, that the U.S. government, look, they're not going to be fooled if you put a Justin Trudeau office lackey in that position. They need someone that can assure the American government that the RCMP will work with the DEA if they want to put a wiretap on a triad boss or a cartel boss in Vancouver and Toronto, because it didn't happen before. The last point is, look, this US-Canada strike force on organized crime, I believe the American government is going to want to see legal memorandums of understanding signed with Ottawa saying, this isn't just pretty language to put off a tariff. This is some sort of joint laws between Canada and the United States where we will have, you working with the fentanyl czar. If the FBI and DEA want to come up to Vancouver and bust one of these triad command control money laundering nodes, which, by the way, I'm afraid, I'll say it, some of these bosses are connected to funding of the Trudeau Liberals. I'll just drop that because it's true. And I believe the Trump administration knows it. So the Americans, we're now, in the Germany-Greece European Union relationship, Canada and United States are there. They're not trusting our word anymore. They need to see our homework.
And that's a problem's not the right word. I mean, it could be a problem if you're effing around, right? So is Canada effing around? And if we are, how do you potentially escape scrutiny? Well, you behave like Mark Carney, you go to China, right? You go somewhere else, anywhere else, right? And so interesting. And does Donald Trump know it? I think he knows the width and breadth of most of the things going on around the world. It's just a matter of, can he prove it? And that's different, right? And so we'll see how it all plays out. I'm not sure how the Canadian relationship with the United States is going to play out, or how the Canadian relationship with China is going to play out, but I feel like it's going to come to a head. Toronto Sun says China is the real threat, not the United States. Despite the current hysteria for many in Canada's chattering classes, the greatest security threat we face is not the United States, but China. Prime Minister Mark Carney agrees. He described China as the number one security threat to Canada during the election. A year ago, the final report of Canada's foreign interference inquiry, presided over by Marie-Josée Hogue, who started working with Jean Chrétien, and I think is also in China now. And Andy Liu was saying, like, this is probably a bad thing. So anyway, that's weird, right? Identified China as the most active perpetrator of foreign interference targeting Canada's democratic institutions. In addition, it said the People's Republic of China targets members of Chinese Canadian diaspora communities for the purpose of repression, influence, and forced return of targeted individuals to the PRC. It deploys a wide range of tradecraft to carry out its activities, one of which is to use a person's family and friends living in the PRC as leverage against them. The PRC uses its diplomatic missions, PRC and international students, community organizations, and private individuals, among others, to carry out its transnational repression activities. Relations between Canada and China reached a low point in 2018 when China kidnapped and falsely imprisoned Canadians Michael Korvik and Michael Spavor in retaliation for Canada's honoring a U.S. arrest warrant for Huawei executive Meng Wanzhou in Vancouver. And there was credible allegations of maybe Michael Spavor being a spy and Michael Korvik kind of being caught up in the whole thing. So it's more complicated than that. But the whole thing is, we're getting in bed with these people? Like, this seems like we're getting in bed with the mob. Like, this doesn't seem like a good idea, guys. Are you sure, leaders of Canada? It's pretty wild. Cardi is heading to China next week to meet with the Chinese president Xi Jinping in a bid to repair diplomatic and business relations. It seems like he's going to kowtow, right? Kowtow very deep. AJ says, if you know why President Trump is doing what he's doing in Gaza, Iran, and Venezuela, read this. Or if you want to know why President Trump is doing what he's doing in these places, read this. And we're going to talk about Venezuela right now, right after this. But I've got to say goodbye to the stream soon. Soon, not quite yet. Most people are watching these flashpoints in isolation. That's a mistake. Trump isn't reacting to events. He's disrupting a network. A quiet axis has been forming for over a decade, and it runs straight through China. Let me connect the dots. The real axis isn't random chaos. It's China, Iran, Venezuela, Palestine, Gaza, with Russia and Cuba orbiting nearby. Different regions, same purpose. Undermine U.S. dominance, evade sanctions, lock down energy and logistics, weaponize anti-imperialism for the global south. Locking down energy and logistics, that's why Carney's going to China to meet with Xi Jinping. That's why. Oil, because they lost Venezuela. That's why. How quickly can you get a pipeline built to Tidewater? The answer is not going to make Xi happy, right? And I don't think Carney's going to be able to fast track it when he gets back. So weaponize anti-imperialism for the global south. China doesn't lead with tanks. It leads with money, infrastructure, and diplomatic cover. Start with Venezuela, Western Hemisphere hub. Venezuela isn't just a failed socialist state. Under Chavez and Maduro, it became a sanctions-busting platform, a logistics node for Iran, a safe operating spot for Hezbollah and Hamas, a money laundering and narcotics corridor aimed at the United States. China poured $100 billion into Venezuela. Iran funneled billions through it. Oil, cash, drones, training, human trafficking, all moved quietly through Caracas. That's why Maduro mattered. And that's why his capture in January 26 detonated the board. Beijing condemned it, not out of principle, but because its assets were exposed. Iran, China's energy lifeline and military lever. Iran is the cornerstone. China imports 1.7 million barrels a day of Iranian oil, buys it cheap off books via barter and currency swaps, funds ports, rail, 5G pipelines, shields Tehran diplomatically at the United Nations. The 25-year China-Iran pact isn't symbolic. It's $400 billion in long-term energy security. Post-Israel-Iran war, China didn't pull back. It accelerated commitments. Why? Because Iran anchors the Gulf access, anti-U.S. military pressure, proxy networks from Gaza to Latin America. No Iran, no access. Gaza, or no access. No group of people operating these things. Gaza and Palestine, the narrative weapon. This is where people get emotional and stop thinking strategically. China's role in Gaza isn't about Hamas, it's about credibility. Beijing uses Palestine to pose as the moral leader of the global south, undercut U.S.-Israel legitimacy. I don't think that the United States should be funding unending wars in Israel. I think that it's diplomatically gray at the very, very best. This is not the best of U.S. diplomacy, and it seems like Iran's wagging the U.S. dog. So Israel's wagging the U.S. dog, not Iran. So I don't agree with that. But that Iran and U.S. have legitimacy, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And people will argue and blah, blah, blah. But again, I want to stay focused on Western countries in the West, in the Western Hemisphere, not the foothold in the Middle East that, quote, needs to be protected by greatest allies. I think that that's a rabbit hole that we're just going to leave. But holy cow. Wrap geopolitics in international law, build influence without boots on the ground. China hosts unity talks between Hamas and Fatah, pushes ceasefires without naming Hamas, condemns Israel while trading $20 billion with it, wins applause across Africa, Middle East, and Latin America, low cost, high narrative return. That's asymmetric warfare. Now connect Gaza back to Venezuela. This is what media never explains. Venezuela openly backed Hamas, funded Palestinian programs, framed itself as a rear base for resistance. Iranian and Hezbollah operatives used Venezuelan space. Chinese money greased the system. Oil paid the bills. This wasn't ideology. It was infrastructure for resistance built far from the Middle East. So what is Trump actually doing? He's cutting the spine, not swatting flies. Disrupt Venezuela, break Iran's Western Hemisphere platform, pressure Iran, threaten China's energy security, control Gaza escalation, deny China its moral high ground. This is preemptive containment, not random aggression. Trump understands what most leaders don't. You don't fight China directly. You dismantle their ecosystem, the ecosystem it hides behind. So why is he leaving Canada? Why is Canada free to operate? They're replacing Venezuela with Canada, sir. Why China is nervous right now? Venezuela flipped from asset to liability. Gaza chaos is harder to exploit. Iran is exposed and economically brittle. It also explains why the pro-Palestinian protests are allowed to operate in Canada so flagrantly, right? China will posture, talk about stability, try to salvage ports, rail, oil, but it will avoid open conflict because China's strategy only works below the threshold of war. Bottom line,